So for these weeks, Cloud and Beyond, we are on week 9 now, and we'll be talking about SLAs. So SLA stands for Service Level Agreement. So it's like a formal contract between a service provider and a customer. So this exists to make sure both sides are on the same page about what the service is and how it should perform or what happens when things go wrong. A way to think of it is like when you sign up for your internet at home, you're kind of entering an informal version of this. So you expect the internet to work, you expect it at a certain Mbps or speed, and if it keeps dropping out or like malfunctioning or not working, you call somebody to fix it. So an SLA is that the same idea, but it is made formal and written down on business purposes. So SLA documents five things: the description of what the service level parameter actually is, the service level objective, basically these are the targets, the agreed service, any warranties, and what happens if someone violates those terms. So if we're talking about in cloud specifically, SLA tends to revolve around these three qualities such as availability, reliability, and scalability. So those are the things that these three are mostly the backbone of most cloud SLAs. Now, SLA is not a one-way solution. It is not something one party just hands to the other and says, here, sign here. It's actually not that. It's a two-way agreement. So the provider shouldn't dictate the terms and the consumer shouldn't have just take it and sign it because the customers or consumers have like expectations as well, and those need to be heard. So if the consumer or the customer never had an input into the SLA, you end up with a situation where they feel like clocked in terms of what they actually never agreed with, and that almost leads to like disputes and confusion later on the service. So both sides bring different perspectives to the table. The provider knows what they can technically deliver, and the customer knows what they actually need for the business to run. So a good SLA reflects both of those things. Also, SLA is not something you rush. I know that sounds obvious, but it happens all the time. Like they want to have SLA quickly, but people sometimes eager to get a deal done and they move like fast enough or like they don't even read the fine print. That's always happened casually. So the problem with rushing is that both parties might be using the same words, but the meaning is different or like it's a two different things. So example, the word availability. So to one person that might mean that a system is online 99.9% of all the time, but to another it might mean that a system is accessible during business hours. So it's a different term. I mean, it's the same word, but it has a different connotation who- to whoever you use it or to whoever understand it. So if you don't align on definition upfront, you're basically just setting yourself up for a conflict on a later date. So that conflict is very expensive and it can cost you your whole business. And this is how we evaluate cloud service agreements. So, first one, you need to understand roles and responsibility. So, who is responsible for what? Sounds simple and easy to assume that the provider covers something that they actually don't. So, second one is evaluate whether the agreement actually aligns with your business policies. So, example of this business level policies is maybe your company is like a hospital and there's certain requirements that need to be agreed upon if you're running a hospital, such as like availability or like data sovereignty. So for example that we had earlier in tutorial, if you have a cloud or data centers in Asia and your hospital is in Australia, that will definitely um that will definitely mm, will be that would definitely wait, I'm finding the word, sorry about that. Violates that definitely violates the data sovereignty. So since your organization might have like specific compliance requirements or ways of operating that the SLA needs to reflect. Third one, and it's very important because the you need to understand a service models such as IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS. And these are all have different SLA expectations. So with IaaS, you have more control and more responsibility sits with you. But with SaaS, the provider is doing more and you have less visibility of how things work. So the SLA is different between these three deployment models. Fourth one is that identify what your critical performance objective actually are. So this includes like the services that need to be function, have how's the performance, how's the uptime, how's the efficiency of it. Fifth one is security and privacy. So make sure that the SLA explicitly address data protection and compliance obligations because if there's like a data breach and it's not in the contract, you will be reliable in that and you might find yourself with very limited recourse. Next one is service management. So how is the service monitored? How are issues reported and how does support look like? And yeah, so if there's a problem in your organization, you can tap on the cloud service IT support to help you figure things out. Next one is prepare for failure. So we're not being pessimistic, but we're being realistic in this one. So what will be the process if things goes wrong? Make sure that the cloud cloud provider have like incident response plans and stuff. And if there's like a disaster that happens, make sure they have DRP in place. So how quickly can the provider can things back up? And we know the concept of RTO and RPO. Recovery time objective is how quickly everything can back up, and RPO recovery point objective is how much data is afforded to to lose in this certain situation. So yeah, next one is ongoing governance process. SLA shouldn't sit in just a drawer. It should be monitored every time. And finally, understand the exit process. So, how do you leave the provider cleanly if you need to? So, how do we switch providers if they don't provide the stuff that you need anymore, or they tend to underperform? So, the substance or SLA substance. So, these are the most critical description of the services provided. So, what is being delivered and how it needs to be detailed, or else it will fall apart. Then you have performance supervision. So, every service needs to be measurable. Then you got standard objectives and metrics. They should be written in the contracts, and we should be using specific language because vague language is dangerous because it might lead to some confusion between the consumer and the provider. Now, problem administration. So, this is like just a process to control and resolve accident. And last one is consumer responsibility. So, this is like a two-way, remember that? So, the customer has to provide access, resources, and cooperation to, and not that's not just the provider's job. Now, SLA also covers licensing cures. This is like the protection around the service quality. So what happens if there's like gaps or loopholes? Then you got reservation section. This deals with your privacy and security the if both parties are being um if they are like on top of that, yeah. And next one is catastrophe recovery and commercial strength. It's like the disaster recovery that we have discussed earlier in services termination. It defines what happens in the end of contract or if we need to terminate it, on what cost and what will be the amount or like the exit cost if you do that. Now we got SLA challenge. First one is the cloud SLAs are generally hard to enforce because of the structural reason. First one is that Parts of infrastructure are outside anyone's control. So the network, it sits outside the customer and the provider. So if there's like a network outage, the provider cannot be held responsible for something that they don't own. So that's a real gap in coverage. Example of this are your ISP, or internet service providers. So that means that since it's network, it doesn't it's not on the sphere of the consumer on the provider, sorry. Second one is multi-tenancy. So most cloud infrastructure is shared, so multiple customers are running on the same capacity. So if one customer have like a spike or like increase in usage, it can affect another customer's performance. And that makes it difficult to have like a consistent service levels for everybody simultaneously. And last one is that um because sometimes we got like SaaS that are like fast growing. So because of multi-tenancy, if there's like a one breach in SLA, it can cascade into breaches for many customer at once. So providers have like a financial incentive and stuff. And for customer perspective, when they got like compensation offered by the business, it really matches the actual business impact of the downtime. So you might get credit for your next invoice, but if your platform was like down during peak hours, the credit doesn't come close to covering your losses. So the takeaway on this is that as a customer, you can't rely solely on the SLA. You need to understand what you're signing, negotiate where you can, and have your own contingency plan in place in case something like this happens.